这样建筑的专业，然后有这些设计的技巧啊，能够绘图，当然还加外加这个电脑的这个技能，对他在这个建筑的操作上，或者是他今天探讨这块领域上有什么帮助哦？那老师就在讲他刚刚的那个UCL 的学生，就是那个藻类实验嘛，你有看到那一个小玻璃盒子，就是那个是那个一般来讲那个培养菌的那个小容器有没有？刚刚那小小的，那他的学生在做这个就是同样的绿藻那个绿藻实验的时候呢，他们是后来做一个很大的模型嘛，你有看到哈？他说那个实验家也都吓到说，哦，原来这件事情可以放大。当他放大的时候，其实看到这个原本他们只做实验，看到那个藻类，其实完全一个不同的 approach 啊。所以这个对就很有趣的这个交流跟对话跟激荡啊，在这个建筑跟在这个原本是完全是这个生物的领域的人，就产生这样的一个交流哦。那当然在刚刚的对话里面还谈到昨天在成大的同学们问到老师，那因为老师当然在回应的时候，他也提到他认为这个我们在这个建筑的这个态度上，attitude 这件事情非常的重要。所以成大学生昨天在最后问他，老师自己在做建筑这个态度上，他讲了蛮多，但是他举个比例说就像我们我们在照顾我们自己的花园法国人有法国人自己照顾花园的方法，美国人有美国人，然后我们当中国人、台湾人都有自己照顾的方法。那不管怎么样你很用心照顾你的花园，然后维持得非常好。那每一个国家、美国地方有不同的文化。然后这个不管怎么样，但是这个背后很重要是这样的一个态度，你愿意好好的去照顾这个花园，就是用 maintain 这个不是又用爱，然后又要维护它那这个他认为就是我们在照顾建筑，其实比较像是这样的一个方式那当然他还提到最后就是这个当我们他提到这个如果我们现在当下提到1980、19年的时候，一群人到了那个就是有点像生态社区这样，他们就反电力、反什么这些东西，他认为这其实是非常不合当代时宜的，因为当时代走到这个的时候，其实时代有时代的一个背景在背后，所以他认为这是很不合时宜的。那他认为在当下呢，马克思认为在当下的自然其实已经非常非常的人为化，而我们的人工的也尽量我们在生活的环境中，其实我们也尽量去朝向自然化。所以其实他觉得这个在我们的生活的环境中，已经没有全然的挖有，或者是就最原始已经全然几乎没有了。那同时呢，我们也不可能全然都是非常的机器，也开始在寻找跟自然更接触的地方。那最重要，他认为就是做建筑的这个态度呢，不应该是建筑这个态度。不应该是只有在墙上种花啦，然后铺草啦，或者甚至他认为有很多的这些能源，好比说你增加了风电发电，然后你的水回收、你的能源等等，然后你可能种了很多的绿色物体蔬菜，你可能改变了你可能好比说你的绿效率有提高，你的水资源有成功，可是你对建筑并没有很大的改变，建筑在空间、建筑在这件事情本质上并没有改变。那他觉得他们想要做的事情，这件事情是有没有机会是透过当下的这个绿色的这个运动，然后在各个领域都在发生的时候，有没有机会建筑的人是可以自然naturalize， 然后这样的一个系统，然后这样的一个思维来做建筑所以他们刚刚在最后一个的案子里面在提，他是在这样的一个思维当中，虽然你看起来好像是公园中的一个装置可是他们在想建筑有没有透过这样子的一个态度跟这样的一个理念来改造，而不是只有粉饰它的表皮，然后建筑的本质不改变他不想做这样的事情。他认为我们时代当下走到这样子我们应该有机会是用更自然的态度然后产生更新的建筑的一个思维我希望我这样子算有翻译贴切了高老师的2个岁算接近吗？好，我如果不接近的话，帮我补充。I have to ask Abby to make sure I did the right translation for all of this. OK， 好，那我们有没有其他问题？时间吗 ？Timing 吗 ？OK， Do we still have time? OK， 有没有问题 ？Yeah, Abby, please. Abby is one of our young faculty, came back from get a degree from Columbia and worked in Hong Kong for a couple of years and just came back this semester. So he's not a student. Okay, Abby, please.
Thank you very much for your time and all the sharing. So I was not dozing off, okay? I was thinking about how to phrase this question, and I guess this is more fundamental in the thinking. as we mentioned, all these inspirations or lessons or know-hows we got from nature, the natural world, albeit through evolution, through time. But everything is grounded on the sole basis of survival and breeding, at least from my understanding. So with this pretense and looking or to rethink what we are doing, as we've seen in the Argo Gazebo project, the sense of it is a really unique project. It's one of a kind, at least so far. And the amount of time and energy and the algorithm that needs to go into it, it's quite arduous and it's quite enormous. So in order to create something that will integrate with nature, in one sense, it takes this amount of work and this amount of time versus nature. The tree next to it grows in the most efficient way in order to survive and spawn other trees. So I mean, this juxtaposition is quite interesting. So I would like to ask, so as a vision or what you see as our computing power is to a level that is close to how a tree thinks, maybe that gets faster. But what do you see the next step is? Do you see this Argo Gazebo becomes a module that could be replicated, but still adapting to differences because no creature is exactly alike, as we know. Do you see this as a future, or there will be continual unique inventions or inspirations with the same logic that pops up all around the corner and take growth of its own?
You know, the Algo project was, for us, quite a key one because it is ongoing for a long time. Just when I showed very briefly this project in the south of Spain for this big canopy, the canopy had a different intention. But we were, since then, this was done in 2005, thinking, how the hell are we going to build this? Just want to build this thing, but how are we going to do this? What script are we going to use if we use it really on a large scale? What do we need to do? And as it often happens with projects, it takes a few years and then there's this opportunity, and then you sort of say, hey, what we are doing is that this solution for that project, but it has a different context and a different story. So I see the Algo Gazebo really part of something that is going to continue. But the Algo Gazebo doesn't have an internal inhabited space. It has a seat, but it's a completely outdoor structure. So I'm not sure if you remember the Sloth project that I showed, where I just showed one image. The Sloth project dealt much more with inner spaces. And it was amazingly challenging because the transition between the sort of outer skeleton and the inner one is extremely complicated. Because the environment changes completely, the exposure to sun, the human engagement with it, everything changes. And it's exactly like in our body. The most sensitive parts of our body are the transition parts between the outer and the inner skin. And in this type of architecture, it becomes the real challenge. It's the turning point from something that is outdoors and becomes indoors. It's amazingly difficult. It's easy to do it like Van Hoven did, which is the inner is a modernist building. It's painted white, it's all sort of traditional stuff. It even has traditional windows, and then it has green around. But there's no transition. It's like a mask. But if your mask wants to become really a face, the difficulty of transition is huge. So our experiment is a tiny, small experiment amongst something that is probably much bigger than people have to come. Is it a prototype? Yes, it is to some extent a prototype. We have been playing with the idea that you, as I recently came from Dubai, you go to the Middle East, or to the Gulf, and you think, gosh, the Algo Gazebo would be amazing if this would be. It's an ideal installation for a very hot climate. And it could have kiosks, it could have all sorts of other containing volumes in these cones, and some of them could be cones, could be something else. you start playing with the idea and think, wow, this is taking me to another different project. So it has a prototypical sort of sense to it. But I by no means see it as the answer. Like, this is one step, and in my lecture, what I tried to convey was that there are many different types of buildings that you can have. The ones that are purely from a larger urban scale. The ones that really try to combine the vertical tower city, hyperdense city with the green. The Hands-Oft one, which is much more into the materiality of the material that can decay from a critical sort of understanding, look at aspects of decay of buildings, and so on. So I think it's up to us to construct in a way, or to create the different sets of approaches that can become or materialize this new phenomenon. I have to say, if you ask me what is the best example I know, I'm not sure what to say. I love the Trinity case of São Paulo. I think it was a very, very spot-on case. It's not my type of building. It's still a bit the modernist type of building with one school. No, the one in São Paulo, which is the sprinklers. What I think is different from that building, when compared with many others that have sort of green walls, is the architects did not attempt to take the wall and put a mask on it. They just created the perforations in a rather irregular way and let the vegetation grow. So it's almost saying like the architecture is a host. Let it just happen. And in a few years' time, when they go back to the building, they will realize that the building is a different building. And I think that's an interesting approach as well. There's a level of chance or of unpredictability that you do not control. And we architects have a tradition of being control freaks. We like to be the dictators of what our product is. Whereas when you get into this, you have a level of not knowing what to draw, as with John Johansson, the guy with the molecular engineer house. What's the next step of drawing? And I used to say to our students that if you draw something that is to do with growth, you at least have to do 3 drawings, at least. The pre-drawing, which is the one before the construction is really becoming. The drawing of what you aim is the piece. And the third one is the one you think it might become that you're not predicting. Because this is what this implies for sure. It's going to turn into something you don't know. And I think to some extent, great buildings of our history have been a bit like that because they didn't have anything growing. You know, buildings, architecture schools are like that. Many good architecture schools are in buildings that have never been thought to be an architecture school. They have been transformed to become an architecture school. And probably the original architects would look at the building and say, this is ridiculous. This is not the building I envisioned. So look, you mentioned another thing, which was to do with survival. I'm not an existentialist, essentialist. I don't believe that we have essential, primitive reasons for being. I think we are very complex beings. I think our reasons for being are amazingly complex. We are not trying to defend ourselves as our brothers and sisters of many generations ago were hunters, where they were trying to survive with killing an animal and survive. I think we live with a level of sophistication where our exactly.
It's very different.
So I'm very critical of huts, of caves. When people sort of design caves, I'm very critical. I feel very nervous about the caves because we are not living in a cave period. I know Taichung has a cave case. There's a restaurant of a cave done by an artist. I find it grotesque. I find it absolutely horrific. It's a horrific cave. I'm sorry. Maybe somebody's here that has to do that. Because it's sort of like going back to the cave. We're not like that. I think we have a level of sophistication that's different. But I see this really as a conjoined effort. And that's what is the pleasure of it. It's when you realize that other people are doing something, you say, hey, this is a really interesting case. I like that. And I feel the pleasure of mentioning some of the other people who I know because I feel they're doing amazing tasks. And they're not right, they're contributing to the scene, which is interesting.
Nature will find its way. Will architects find our way?
Yeah, we'll find our way. Of course.
刚刚那个高老师应该是讲一大堆了哈，还是你要自己翻译？ 然后其实他问到一个重点，就是他们在最后的这个案子之后，那因为是相对是很小的树里面的一个小 project， 那这件事情的下一步会是什么？会是比较大的，还是会是 module， 还是会是什么样的方式？那下一步会是什么？那其实那个马克思在回答就说，其实他也不太确定有一定的答案哦。那在这个整个的过程中，他举了一大堆了，但是对不起，我们都写下来。不过他个人其实他也没有很好的例子可以跟你们分享，可是他觉得刚刚有一个是应该是一个墨吧，还有一道墙有没有？然后看到一大堆喷水的一个案子啊，然后那道墙就慢慢的长得非常非常自然的，用他们自己的方式长出来。那他认为建筑提供了一个很好的养分的环境，甚至一个培养皿，让那个环境的垂直的墙，不是戴上一个 mask， 不是戴上一个面具，好像我们刚刚很多纸身墙一样，不是，而是他用他自己的方式去长起来。那他认为这个自然生长，然后通过建筑的这个方式，他认为这是非常迷人的哦。所以建筑如果你说一定要能够通过建筑的手，就回到刚刚 Steven 老师的问题。如果你要画那个生长这件事情，生长这件事情非常有机，很难画。他说他当然要求他只能画3个步骤。第一个就是你想想看，在这个之前，这个未生长前大概什么样子？第二个呢，就是你企图它达到什么样子？你目的设计它成什么样子？第三个就是，你大概想它长什么样子？也就是未来式、进行式，可是它可能可以长什么样子哦？那他觉得这个设计最可爱的地方就在于。非常非常多的那个不可预期的未知的生命力的自然的，那这个其实是他觉得这个是他现在一直在操作这个建筑，即便你们看到这么电脑的操作的方式的结果，他还是认为有很多的不可预期跟不可预知，那个其实就像生命力的力量一样，那个还是最迷人的哦。好，那最后当然也问到了那个不要从洞穴啦什么这些东西去谈设计哦。我们台中哪一个是那个什么吗？运动已经没有人去那个叫什么来着？长得像洞穴那个啊？五角船板对吧？还有开吗？还有开吗 ？I don't know that cave one still survive or not。不要再做这样的事情。他认为，他说，你看我们当下有这么多人contribute 这么多的事情，让你觉得很美丽，你也会赞叹。有这么多的事情其实连接在一起，然后你应该就是这其实是一个季节的事，不要否认你在当下的一个时代性哦。那这个当下其实有好多人也在做很多事情哦。然后其实这些事情可以成为你的应该是你的人员啊，或者是你的养分的人哦。那大概是有这样的一个分享。其实还是回到那个自然的力量，自然的生长的力量哦，还是他想做的，即便他们其实用了非常非常的科技跟技术啊。OK，alright， 好，你要补充吗？啊，yeah.
To wrap it up, there is a very small movie that I actually showed when there was a conference at my university a few months ago. And I might show it here as well, because you know what, the other day I was looking for an alternative, but I couldn't find a better one. I just thought, this is sort of to the point of what you were asking me, sort of what might be a vision or something. And for me, this is a bit of vision that at least makes me excited. Because it's something that I think if we manage to create this place, it doesn't take long. What we need is a sound. There was a sound.
章鱼去跳了。
Basically, it was a small documentary extract of David Attenborough's sort of description of the corals. And there's some visuals that are so extraordinary. There's this level of fluctuation of the corals in the sea, the sporing moment, which for me stimulates me hugely. It's of the stuff that most affects me. And I think we as designers all the time have that stuff that really doesn't let us sleep somehow. You're just constantly thinking about what it means, how does this drive you further. And I'm at a stage personally where these images bring about many more questions to me that are far more stimulating than to look at sort of architectural things. Because, you know, there is a level of not achieved potential that I think is amazing. And let's say that I'm sure another time.
Yeah. Okay.还没问题啊？ Any more questions? Yeah.
想问一下，有什么特质是老师要说他学生必须要的？
什么东西？
老师的编辑要有哪些特质？
Well, the student is asking that if you want to go to Bartlett study, what is the requirement? Come on, guys, stand up. Have the courage.
What's the answer? You have to apply.
Then you have to compete with the other.
That's what you have to do in all the schools, not only in the Bartlett. You have to do it in all the other schools. If you apply, then and once you apply, you will apply to other schools as well, and then at some point, as many, I know many people here with fortune tellers decide where they go. They then tell them that America is better than Europe, or London is better than Delft. Something in your fate will tell you that Bartlett was the right place or the wrong place. I don't know. But do apply, of course.
No shortcut.
There's no shortcut. I'm not walking around with a pile of sort of application forms.
Very simple. 好的，以上问题成立，大家好，请过去。好，他们说其他问题呀？
Maybe several years ago, maybe several decades, it's called biomimicry. So, what do you think about biomimicry if we can use it in architecture?
You say it again. So a few years ago,
Biomimicry. Yes. And it's a book wrote by Jenny Bayes. She said there are many ways we can imitate nature. And the biomimicry tell us inspired by nature. So if we can use it in architecture.
you mentioned somebody I'm hugely critical. I'm seriously critical. When I was invited to this conference about biomimicry at the University of Syracuse, which was sort of a year and a half ago, I got shocked of how many people they are who are completely and utterly uncritical about this. One of the first problems that Janine has is that in all the followers is the belief that nature developed for 1.5 billion years and it turned into sort of level of perfection that we should imitate and mimic. And it's complete bullshit. It's completely wrong. You just ask any biologist. Thank God at during that conference there were 2 biologists and they were very irritated. They said biology is never and nature is never in equilibrium. It'll never achieve perfection. It's a constant evolution because it's unbalanced and therefore it's trying to find a balance that it cannot achieve. So the first premise of the whole biomimicry sort of group, and it's sort of almost gang, I would say, is the belief that nature has these sort of perfect principles that we need to copy. I don't think so. Now, having said that, I think there are principles that are very interesting to look at. And clearly the current group of biometric thinking is looking into these environmental parallels. But if you think the majority of cases have been applied on products or objects, not on architecture buildings, with the exception of the arts nest, the passive